Hey everyone, this is Sportsman Peralta. I know it's been a while, but the MLB offseason has thrown some very interesting loops for us. We've seen some intriguing moves, and we've seen some moves from the New York Mets that make me scratch my head and wonder, what are we doing? As a Met fan, I want to know what we're doing. I mean, last month, the beginning of December was probably one of the worst weeks, I think, for a lot of Met fans around the city, myself included. To lose two legitimate franchise pieces in Pete Alonso, who signed a 7-year deal to take his talents down to Baltimore because the Mets couldn't be bothered, apparently, to offer him a real deal. And then Edwin Diaz, who said, I want a 5-year deal. And then he went and apparently had a 5-year deal on the table from Atlanta, didn't take it. And then even though the Mets offered him $20 million a year, 3 years, 66, he chose to take his talents to the Dodgers. So, yeah. And then the Mets are going to make a big offer for Kyle Tucker. Reportedly, they offered him 4 years, $220 million, about roughly $50 million a year, which is something because Stearns is someone who doesn't really like to go usually above 3 years with free agents generally. The Soto deal might be the exception for that. Mets offer him 4 years, $220, Kyle Tucker. And then on Thursday at work, I find out that Kyle Tucker is not only not joining the New York Mets, not only is he not taking the 10-year deal that apparently the Toronto Blue Jays offered him. No, Kyle Tucker took a 4-year deal for $260 million to go where? The Dodgers. Because the Dodgers apparently don't have enough talent on their roster. They have to get even more. And this is after, by the way, they've won 2 straight world championships. So, and people want to say baseball's not broken, right? Anyway, I'll address that in a minute. Now, that being said, on Saturday, the Mets announced they did make a move. They signed Bo Bichette, the former Toronto Blue Jays second baseman, to a 3-year, $126 million deal. There is an opt-out after 2027 and after, I believe, 2026 as well. Let me just confirm that. Yes. So this is an interesting move for the Mets because, one, it does provide a big bat in the lineup, either in front of Soto or behind Soto to give him some protection. The question is, where is Bo Bichette going to play? Because he is a second baseman. That's his natural position. The Mets, of course, acquired Marcus Semien, the Rangers' second baseman, in the trade where they sent Nimmo to Texas. So you could either DH with Semien, which I don't think the Mets are going to do because Semien was brought in for defense, which we know Stearns has been wanting to address since the 2025 season ended. So you could put maybe Bichette at third base, which I heard the Mets might consider doing, even though Bichette, to my knowledge, has never played third base in his career. So see how that goes. Or they could DH Bichette, but I don't think the Mets are going to do that. You don't give someone that kind of money to DH them. So where does Brett Beatty go from here? Where does Ronnie Mauricio go from here? Will one of them be moved possibly? That is yet to be determined. Now, this being said, do I think the Mets made a good move getting Bichette? Yes. As I said, he's a decent defender. He is a very good quality at bat, especially with runners in scoring position, which is something the Mets have had issues with the last few years. He also is a good locker room presence, which we've heard the Mets the locker room may have been an issue last year when things really started to fall apart for all the reasons we've heard about in the press. I won't go into them here. So I think I'm happier with the Bichette deal, knowing obviously Tucker. I mean, we could have had Tucker, who would have been a very good outfielder, but at 4 years, $220, the fact that he basically, I think, used us to get a deal with the Dodgers, I don't know. You want to play and win a ring, go there. That's please. So I think Bichette will be a good fit for the Mets. Now, will this be a long-term thing? Will he opt out after 2026 or 27? That's going to be interesting because from what I understand, the Phillies, I think, believe they had a 7-year offer on the table for Bichette. It appeared that they thought Bichette would come to Philly before he backed out and decided not to go to Philly. Thank God, because the Phillies, oh, God help us. And he decided to take his talents to Flushing because, he wants to win, because the Phillies, I mean, they let Ranger Suarez walk to Boston. They couldn't afford him, but they wanted to throw $200 million at Bo Bichette. Okay. So I'm very happy Bichette's not going to Philadelphia. Let me put it that way. I'm happy he's with us. Now, what will the Mets do from here? Now, we've heard, we thought Ranger Suarez might be an option, but as I mentioned, he signed a deal last week with the Red Sox. The Mets could go after still Framber Valdez, the Astros free agent pitcher. Again, though, I think that would probably be more in a short-term deal because the Mets, I don't think, want to go more than 5 or 6 years with Framber Valdez because of his injury issues and attitude issues from what we saw last year. So I don't know if that option is still in play. We've heard rumors about Freddy Peralta maybe coming to the Mets. That would have to be done in a trade. Maybe Mauricio Urbaty could be moved in maybe a deal like that. We have to see because the Mets really do need to get another pitcher because outside of Nolan McLean, who pitched very well at the end of the season, you have Minaya, who was injured last year and wasn't very effective. You had Senga, who got hurt and then wasn't very effective after a good start. Peterson was very good in the first half and then kind of fell apart in the second half, maybe due to usage or whatever. But the Mets have to get pitching. Because, I mean, there was a month last year when everything fell apart. I think the Mets starters were averaging 4 innings per start. Now, you're not going to win many games when your starting pitching can only give you 4 innings. I don't care who the manager is. I don't care what your issues are with Mendoza. You're not going to win like that. And there's nothing Mendoza can do if his pitchers don't go deep in games. Nothing. So I think the Mets do need to get another starter to kind of shore up the rotation. So hopefully David Stearns has a plan for that. But the Mets did get Luke Weaver. They signed him as a free agent from the Yankees. They also signed Devin Williams before they let Diaz go. So take that for what it's worth. The Devin deal was 3 years at 51, if I'm correct. And Weaver, I think, will be good in the setup role. Devin as closer, well, we'll have to see. In Milwaukee, he was phenomenal, and then with the Yankees, I don't think Yankee fans need me telling them how bad the Devin Williams experience was last year. Pete Alonso may have had something to do with that. So, what goes around comes around. Do I think the Mets can compete for the division title at this point? No, because I think they need another starter because right now our starting pitching I just don't think can compete with Philadelphia or Atlanta right now. There's just too many question marks with Minaya, Senga, Peterson. The Mets will get Christian Scott back. He had Tommy John last year, wasn't available. He could add some depth. But I think the Mets need to get someone like a Valdez or like a Peralta or possibly someone else in a trade depending on what the Mets and David Stearns do from here. So I think I've been disappointed with Stearns because I just don't understand I'm more disappointed with him in the Alonso situation. Diaz, you offered him 3 years at over $20 million. He just wanted to play for LA apparently. So I can't fault Stearns too much there. I mean, you offered him over $20 million he didn't want. Maybe he wanted to play with the Dodgers and win a ring. Whatever. Not happy with Diaz, but okay. Pete Alonso, I know for a fact, would have stayed if we offered him something decent. But the Mets apparently didn't want to get into a bidding war and offer him over $120 million, which I think is a little ridiculous based on what Pete's done for us over the last 4 or 5 seasons. I think you had to give him... You at least had to come close. That's all I'm going to say. And I just don't think you let a bat like that in your lineup walk, because other than Soto and now Bichette, you really don't have anyone in your lineup that's a legitimate threat to drive in runs or, make pitchers kind of feel, okay, I have to pitch to X, Y, and Z because I know there's another batter in the lineup who I'm going to have to face down the line. So to lose Pete, who had improved a lot at first base defensively, and you take away, obviously, his home runs, his RBIs, and his defense, it's just hard to understand why the Mets didn't want to keep Pete around. Now, granted, they did offer Pete back in, I think, 2023, a long-term deal, and Alonso and Scott Boras said, no, we're not interested. So that was before, I believe, Stearns came in, but still, the Mets did offer him a long-term deal. He said no. So that being said, am I still worried about the Mets? Yes. I think they still have some moves they have to make. Are they a playoff team at this point? I don't know. I thought they would be last year, and we saw how last year fell apart. So you can't predict, obviously, baseball. Now, the Phillies are a little bit weaker because they lost Suarez and their starting pitching won't be as good. Atlanta, I think, will be, a threat again because they'll have Chris Sale healthy. He missed a lot of time last year. Acuna got hurt, of course. They had a lot of injuries and stuff kind of hurt them. And maybe they got a little bit lackadaisical with their old manager. They brought in someone new. Maybe he'll provide a spark. The Marlins are improving. The Nationals are starting to improve. I don't know if they're quite ready yet to compete for the title. I think Philadelphia at this point is probably still the team to beat. Maybe Atlanta a little bit below them, and maybe the Mets if they can get another starter. And, of course, the fact that does Major League Baseball need a lockout? Yes, because it's getting absolutely ridiculous what is going on with the Dodgers. I'm sorry. The fact that Shohei Ohtani is getting paid $2 million a year, I'm not exaggerating that, $2 million a year, because the rest of the $700 million deal he signed is deferred money, so that the Dodgers can still go after these people. It's ridiculous. I'm sorry. I get, yes, the Dodgers have a lot of money from their brand, from everything. I get that. And I agree that other teams need to spend money because the Pirates, for instance, have a billionaire owner who doesn't put a penny into that team. Then you have the Nationals, who were owned by the Lerner family. Were worth millions of dollars. They barely put anything into their team, pretty much. I do agree that needs to be addressed because that also, you can't blame the Dodgers when some teams didn't want to pay their players. Mookie Betts probably would have stayed a Red Sox, but the Red Sox didn't want to pay him, so Dodgers were like, okay, you don't want to pay him, we'll try to get him, and they did. Freddie Freeman wanted to stay a Brave, but the Braves like, nope, we don't want to give you 6 years, we don't want to give you $160 million. Dodgers were like, okay, well, we need a first baseman, come on down. I don't have an issue so much with that, because obviously the Yankees spend a lot of money to get Aaron Judge extended. They got Garrett Cole on a free agent deal. The Mets, of course, signed Soto for $765 million. No deferred money, by the way. My big issue with the Dodgers is the deferred payment. That needs to be addressed, because the fact that they signed Ohtani, they're only paying him $2 million a year. You've got Freddie Freeman still under his 6-year, $162 million deal he signed after the 2021 season. Mookie Betts they signed to a big extension. They got Blake Snell last year for, I think, 6 years, roughly $160 60 million as well, maybe a little higher. I mean, it's something that it does need to be addressed. The whole salary cap thing, I think baseball does need to maybe consider that, or they need to crack down on the deferred money and how that structure works, because that really needs to be addressed. Otherwise, I think baseball needs to have a lockout, because it is starting to get out of control what's going on in with the Dodgers and some other teams who think we can just do these contracts and defer all the money, and then we can arrange the books so we can sign 3 or 4 other people. That I have a problem with. So those are my feelings on that. Please continue to subscribe to my channel, Sportsman Pariente, and please feel free to share your views on whether you think baseball could be heading for a lockout, what you think of the Dodgers' spending spree, and about the Mets offseason. So, until then, stay tuned.